Hi, I'm Kimber Rose, and on today's Confessions from the Vault, I'd like to discuss the anatomy of an orgasm. But first, we have to discuss the anatomy, right? Actually, men and women have the same parts. They're just arranged a little differently. Well, a lot differently. But if you are a woman and you're watching this video, I would like to encourage you, if you haven't already, I would suggest getting a mirror out and just taking a look at yourself. Take a little inventory, if you will. See how you look down there. See what you're made of. That way, when you're with your partner, you're a little bit more comfortable with what's going on. Having said that, I would like to bring out my vulva pillow, okay? So I call it a vulva pillow because that is what it is. Everything that is external on the female genitalia is called a vulva. This inside, that's the vagina. So a lot of people refer to this as a vagina, but it's incorrect. This is actually a vulva. You can also call it a pussy. That would be correct. A lot of people get offended by that word. I'm not sure why, but I do like to use it every once in a while. In fact, I use it a lot more now than I ever have in the past. So if you were offended by that, I do apologize. But I do feel like you should probably read the book Pussy of Reclamation because it just talks about the amazing power of that word. Anyways, I digress because this is not about that. This is about the anatomy of an orgasm. So we have the labia majora, the labia minora, what outer lips, inner lips, clitoral hood, clitoris. Okay, those are everything that makes up the vulva. And I feel like it's really important to discuss the clitoris a little bit more in detail because the clitoris is the crown jewel. I mean, it is the only piece of anatomy that we were created with that just provides pleasure for us. The head of the clitoris itself has over 10,000 nerve endings in it. That's an immense amount of pleasure that us women get to have. Now, men, like I said, you're with the same parts, they're just arranged a little differently. So for females, it's the clitoris. For men, like your clitoris is called the frenulum. And it doesn't have as many nerve endings as our clitoris does, but it still has a lot of nerve endings, and that's why it's the most sensitive area on a man. But today, just for the sake of time, I'm just going to address the female anatomy and the clitoris. So clitoris is actually shaped like a wishbone. And like I said earlier, it's the same parts, just arranged differently. So these clitoral legs right here are actually what make up the penis. And when these become engorged with blood, that's what makes the penis erect. So women actually get erections as well, because when these clitoral legs fill up with blood, they actually get stiff and they engorge. And the beauty of this is the clitoris lies in the surrounding area of the vaginal canal, right? So when you enter through the vaginal canal, when you go inside, you're actually in between those clitoral legs. And why that's important to know is because sometimes when you're with your lady and she feels a little bit more snug than usual, then you know that she's really engorged. Her clitoral legs are so engorged, she's erect, and that's what makes it feel a little bit tighter, okay? But you didn't know that. And if you did know it, 2 stars for you. Now, the rest of the clitoral legs here, these are also full of nerve endings, and they eventually meet back and they meet up at sort of like that G-spot, which one of my other videos I discussed the G-spot. We're not going to get into that fully today. Anyway, with the clitoral legs, it provides so much stimulation and so much pleasure that you can not only just have an orgasm with just clitoral stimulation direct to the clitoral gland, but with vaginal stimulation because it's still stimulating these inner legs. And then, of course, the G-spot is another kind of form of clitoral stimulation because of where the Skene's glands are located. And I do want to just bring back my vulva pillow here for just a second. So if this is the clitoris, you have the Skene's glands. They're located on either side of the clitoris, but behind the clitoris. So I just want to really quick, just reference the G-spot. So remember when I said that the G-spot, you enter like 2 fingers in and do this come hither motion? Well, if the Skene's glands are located here, that would make sense, right? Because the G-spot is essentially stimulating those Skene's glands. So what I really wanted to get into is part of the anatomy and what makes it easier or more difficult for a woman to have an orgasm It depends on where your clitoris is located. So depending upon how far away from the vaginal opening it is or how close to the vaginal opening it is. Think about when you're having penetrative sex. The penis doesn't really do anything to stimulate the clitoris, the gland of the clitoris. If your clitoris is very far apart from your vaginal opening, you will tend to not get as much stimulation, therefore will require some external stimulation with either manual stimulation with your fingers or some assistance with a vibrator. Now, men, if you're listening, if your partner requires some sort of stimulation that is more than just what a manual stimulation can provide, maybe they need a vibrator, don't take offense to this. It's not anything to do with you. It's just that your penis wasn't shaped in the way to stimulate the clitoris while you're penetrating, okay? Now, women who have a clitoris that's a little bit closer to the vaginal opening tend to get more action, and they tend to be multi-orgasmic, or maybe they're ultra sensitive. So remember how I said the clitoris is like the crown jewel? I also wanted to go into a little bit of detail about the size of the clitoris. Not the size of this clitoris, but the actual size of the gland, the clitoral gland. The head, the part that you see that sticks out from underneath the clitoral hood. In some women, it doesn't stick out from underneath the clitoral hood. It can be a little bit smaller. And other women, they can have a clitoris that sticks out maybe a ½ inch to an inch. Sometimes that's natural. That's just natural anatomy. But some women, depending on maybe some medications that they've taken, can have something called clitoromegaly. There's nothing wrong with that either. It just means that you have an enlarged clitoris. Those women, though, tend to be very hypersensitive. Think about, I'm going to go kind of back and forth between the male and female anatomy. Think about the clitoral hood, and the function that it provides is to actually protect the gland of the clitoris because it's so full of nerve endings. Think about the foreskin for the penis. Its actual duty or function is to protect the head of the penis because it has the most nerve endings. So now that you know the anatomy and how it functions, how it relates to having an orgasm, I highly encourage you to not forget about the other sex organ that we all have, and it is our brain. It is the second largest sex organ. I mean, I would consider the skin our first largest sex organ because of sensual touch and whatnot. But the brain, the reason why I say that is because it is really very powerful, and it controls how well we have an orgasm or not. It can prevent us from having an orgasm. Like, how many of you have ever been in the middle of having relations and you have a thought that comes into your head and then it completely wipes out the desire? But I do appreciate you spending time with me today and learning a little bit more about the anatomy of an orgasm. I'm Kimber Rose. Thank you very much.